Perfect. Got it.
All right, do you want to start by introducing yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Sara Gibbs. I'm a comedy writer and author. Wrote a book called Drama Queen. Some people might have read it. If you haven't, please do plug. I'm autistic and very excited to be here today.
All right, thanks for introducing yourself, Sara. As we were saying about your book, I read that and it was an excellent read and quite emotive and empowering, as you say. It can reflect on like the labels that you've been given throughout your life and kind of like focusing on as a member, looking up until the time you got labeled or being autistic.
Yeah.
And like it kind of mainly highlighted you getting it labeled drama queen. So like I tend to ask about like at the start about the diagnosis and like when you got diagnosed and what like traits and experiences you have as an autistic person.
Yeah. Oh, so my diagnosis. Wow, that was almost 5 years ago now. So I was 30, and it kind of came completely out the blue in what I think a lot of late diagnosed people might relate to this. It came completely out of the blue in one way and then completely not in many others. It explained a lot, but before it was suggested to me that I might be autistic, I didn't know anything about autism really. I knew what I thought I knew, what lots of people think they know, that autistic people are maths like savants and things like utter nonsense or stereotypes. And so I actually, it was suggested to me that I was autistic by my cousin Dominique, who is wonderful and knows a lot about autism for various reasons. And we were just at a family party, and it was quite an overwhelming situation. And I was sort of, without realizing it, stimming, and I was sort of pushing the very posh food around my plate and not eating it, and I was dressed really bright and loud, and I was sort of ticking a lot of boxes, and we didn't know each other all that well before this, and she just suddenly said to me, you're autistic, right? And I was like, no, you don't understand, I'm really bad at maths. So that can't be right. And she's like, that's not what autism is. And she was so patient and very gently and quite bravely, I think, given the potential for a bad reaction or the stigma around being autistic, she explained to me how autism can present differently in different people. And I sat there at the table and I found this little, like, not diagnostic quiz, obviously nothing is diagnostic officially, but I found this little quiz online and did the checklist, and it was like, you are very likely autistic. I was like, okay. I guess I should look into this more.
But I suppose the online quizzes are very helpful to think, well, have I just thinking this, or have I been told this, and is this actually real? And then you can think, oh, maybe I should look into this a bit further.
Yeah.
And as you said, it must have been quite a big thing. Like, as you said, you never put the words Sara and autism together before that moment. And it must have been quite a big thing then, just all of a sudden being told, sorry, you're autistic, right?
Yeah, it threw me for a loop. And at first I was quite resistant. I did that little quiz and I was like, oh, but that's like horoscope syndrome. Like you can apply anything. Like I bet everyone would score high on this quiz. And Dominique said, look, I'm going to send you some resources. And like, if you think it's not you, then we won't talk about it again. It's fine. And she sent me this sort of list on how, I guess it's tricky because discussions move so quickly in sort of liberation spaces and disability spaces. And, 5 years ago, we were talking about autism in women as its own distinct thing. And today, we very much think along the lines of there's no female autism. It's just that our behaviors are interpreted differently, or that there are different presentations of autism and those aren't necessarily gendered. But at the time she sent me a checklist of like what autism can look like in women. And I was like, oh, like sort of reading it the next day, I was like, that's me. That's not like, it's like someone followed me around with a notepad my whole life, like even just really specific stuff, childhood stuff, interests. Like it was like honestly like reading a biography of myself written by someone I didn't know, and it was very spooky.
Yeah, as I was saying with that, it, like as you say, if you didn't know you're autistic, then you just assume that everyone's like experiences or like what you like is like the status quo of what people are typically like, and then like it's just, I guess it must felt like a surprise then to realize that not everyone else is in the same way as you, if you
Yes.
get what I mean. Yeah. And as you were saying then, like with how like things can progress quite quick in the community then, and like how you found that, when you were taught the first year the word autism reference to yourself, then like you were still thinking of like the kind of like Rain Man ideals of the
Yeah.
savant and the math stuff. And as you say about like the community moving quick, and it's always how far like the rest of society is, and the more mainstream narrative is kind of further away from what autism actually is.
Yeah, it's a gulf, isn't it? It's massive between what society thinks autism is and what autistic people know autism is, or not even. I mean, I talk about autism as like this concept, this sort of, like, as if it's a condition, because that's how we're sort of conditioned to talk about it, so to speak. We're taught that autism is a medical diagnosis and all that, and actually, like, autism is it's a neurotype and it's an identity, and it sort of shapes who you are. So like talking about autism as like, as a thing feels really weird even now. That's how far away we are from how the rest of society is talking about it. Yeah, it is jarring, and I think it's really interesting because the more you're in autistic spaces and the more you're immersed in autistic culture and other autistic people, you almost sort of forget. And then someone will say something like, oh, well, we're all a bit autistic, right? And the rage bubbles up, and you're like, you have to remember to be kind of like quite patient with people, because they really don't know. And there was a time when I didn't know, and like if someone had yelled at me, I probably never would have known. So it's tricky, isn't it?
Yeah, because it's quite tricky then, because it's like until you enter the spaces of like what like the autistic communities, then you're like not non-sure, not don't know that much about autism and what it actually is. And as you're saying about engaging with community and looking at whatever resources there is, like you can learn so much about yourself and about, what autism actually is then. And like, like since you've been diagnosed and since you started talking about it online, then you've been able to engage in the world of that.
Yeah, but it's interesting because you're given, when you're diagnosed and you don't have that community support beforehand. And this is why I think self-diagnosis first is so valuable, because if you are sort of self-identifying and you do enter those spaces a little bit before your medical diagnosis, you're less likely to blunder into them like I did, using the medicalized language that you've been given by your doctors, by your peers, without sort of the understanding a framework of narratives and discussions around disability. And so when I was first diagnosed, I was like, oh, okay, well, the doctors said I'm high functioning, so I guess I'm high functioning, whatever that, like, I didn't think about what it meant, or what functioning labels meant, or if they were okay. I was like, that's what I've been told I am, and I've been told I have Asperger's, and I've been told, so you kind of, it's tricky entering those spaces for the first time and then opening your mouth and finding out just how big that gulf is. And it can really upset and trigger people, which is completely understandable, because it's exhausting. And I know 5 years in how exhausting it is to hear people say the same things over and over that are like not okay. But yeah, it's a daunting thing when you're newly diagnosed, trying to enter the conversation and probably getting it wrong because you haven't had that sort of support and the tools to understand yet. And it's all part of the learning process. But I think because I maybe had a little bit, not a big profile, but I had a bit of a Twitter following, and I had my writing and things. When I made those mistakes, they were a lot more visible, and it was a lot more embarrassing.
Yeah, I was just saying about with your Twitter profile, I think it's like somehow like since like you had like a bit of a following before then, and I think since you've been diagnosed and since you started talking about it, I think like your like online presence kind of like increased rapidly on like social media. And when you were talking about self-diagnosis, then I think like being able to engage beforehand, before your diagnosis, and research a lot before that, of like looking at whether it's like TikTok videos of autistic people reading tweets and different blogs of autistic people, I think, and like talking to autistic people, I think then that can give you the power to self-advocate, as you were saying, with the medical language and what doctors can say. I think then it's harder without kind of self-identifying first, to be able to know how to tell your doctor and communicate in a way that can ensure you a more likely chance of getting diagnosed.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the knowledge is power, and the more you have when you're going into that situation, the better, really. Because if you're prepared for your doctor, and my doctor did say, "Oh, well, I don't see the point because there's no cure." And I said, "Well, at that point, I didn't know a lot, but I knew enough to know that like I didn't want a cure. I just wanted I wanted some validation, and I wanted an answer." And the only reason I think that I got referred on was because my husband, via work, has the sort of like automatic benefit from his workplace of private health insurance. And so I think that my doctor was ready to say no. And when I said, I'll go private, he was like, oh, okay, here you go. He like, washed his hands of it, and that was fine for him. But, if you're navigating a system that doesn't want to refer you on, that doesn't have a great understanding of autism full stop, let alone like late diagnosis or autism in adults, or different presentations of autism or autistic identities, then you might come up against something, and it's really hard for us in medical situations to advocate for ourselves at the best of times. It's scary, and it's stressful, and it's admin, and it can be really difficult. So the more you have, the better.
Yeah, because as you were saying with the medical professionals, and again, like talking to your GP about that, it's then difficult because you have to like kind of like trust and feel comfortable and safe to your doctor to talk about these things, and like feel comfortable in talking about it, and then hopefully like getting referral from that. And sometimes it's not always like you're fortunate to get that, and sometimes then if you like it's stressed out, as it can be quite stressful process, then like it can be then hard to get words out then. And I think, as you were saying, that like if like by this seems it was a doctor saying it was a bit pointless referring you because like there's no such thing as cure. But then it's like, as you were saying, it's not about cure, and it's like the issue then with the medical community is that negative language around autism, expecting it to be something to be cured or treated in a medical sense. But like for an autistic person or neurodivergent person, getting a diagnosis of any neurodivergent condition is about finding something out about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's difficult because what do? You go into a doctor's surgery and say, but I just want to understand myself better. They don't care about that. You're a list of symptoms to them. So you sort of have to play their game a little bit, and we're not great at playing games. That's not in our wheelhouse necessarily as autistic people, to know the right thing to say to make the right thing happen, even if it's not true, or if it's quite difficult for us. We tend to be honest.
It's like with like the labels you were touched on in the book, like you were like maybe like being seen as like lazy, difficult, or and like stuff like that, as well as you said drama queen and like sensitive and stuff like that. And the thing is, then I guess it was like a point of getting a diagnosis. It's not making like understanding about like these negative labels and understanding it. It's not like there's a reason behind this, and it's autism. And like I guess like you probably like with the negative labels you might have found something before but never like thought about it, that seemed a bit different, hence the labels. And it probably like you went to the relief of knowing what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people, when I first went for a diagnosis, so many people said to me, why do you need a label? It's like, oh, sorry, just the one. Why do I need one label? Let me tell you about all the other labels that, that's like you said, there's so much judgment and self-judgment as well, and lack of understanding and lack of compassion for, I mean, even when you have a diagnosis, there's still people who think you're putting it on, or
Yeah,
or that you're just a bit quirky, or that you're very mild, or all of these things. When you don't have a diagnosis and you're just behaving in a way people perceive to be wrong or odd or different or difficult, then you've got no way to even defend yourself to yourself. You've got no way to protect
yeah.
your self-esteem and your self-image. You start to really believe all these terrible negative things about yourself because you're hearing them constantly. So it's a relief to get a label that is compassionate and explains things and isn't laced with judgment and cruelty.
Yeah, because it can be quite exhausting trying to explain these things.
Mm-hmm.
And then if like getting a label like autism, as we were discussing earlier, then with the thing of like the autistic community moving faster, or like and involving the conversation around autism
Yeah.
faster than the rest of society, then when you like thought that people just perceive you as mild, and like since that, like we're using terms more like autism rather than high functioning or Asperger's these days, then I
Yeah.
think there's some people still that would think of autism as more like a what they see as like high, like the traditional like look traditionally seen as under the functional labels of
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
lower functioning, all I guess both needs.
Yeah, I think in terms of like support needs, it's really tricky having that conversation, like you say, because we are so much further on in the disability community than mainstream society. And a lot of people, they might have an autistic relative, they might have an autistic relative with very high support needs or with comorbid conditions, or an autistic relative who is non-speaking. And so they see that and they cannot comprehend an existence where where a life is still valid without all of the things that they value.
Yeah,
So there's that side of it where they look at autistic people and they think low functioning because it's not the life that they would enjoy. They're like, oh, all these rigid behaviors and narrow interests, and they can't even do this and they can't even do that. And it's like, but that doesn't mean it's not a happy life. That doesn't mean it's not a valid life. That doesn't mean it's not a good life. And then also what they do on the flip side is they look at someone like me who talks a mile a minute, and that's that's a sort of special interest thing, is a language thing for me. I've always
yeah,
been hyperlexic. I've always really enjoyed using language. I've always enjoyed overusing language, and so they assume because I'm like quite highly verbal, that I am wildly competent in all other areas. And one of the things I hear a lot is, it's insulting because my relative X, Y, and Z can't live independently. And so, but I can't live independently. I don't live independently. If you saw how high my support needs actually are, they're not high in terms of I don't need assistance speaking or dressing, but they're high in terms of I have quite a lot of chronic health conditions which would be unmanageable without my husband advocating for me, because they require multiple conversations with the doctor, like quite frequently, and constant admin to keep on top of prescriptions and constantly remembering to take medications. I'd be dead. I'm not well enough with my comorbid conditions to cook for myself and clean up after myself. I genuinely could not survive without pretty much full-time care. And so when people sort of write your needs off, they go, well, you're fine, you're mild. And it's like, but that's not a helpful, it's not a helpful framework to look at disability, to say, well, you can do one thing, so you should be able to do all things, or you can't do some things, therefore your life isn't valid and you're not valuable.
yeah. As I was saying about somebody who will see you like that, then it's like sometimes like somebody would only see one side of you, and like as everyone would know about themselves, that there's many sides to like them as a person, and that's the same for an
Mhm.
autistic person, and like everyone like varies from day to day, and that's the same for autistic people, you know, like needs can vary from day to day.
Yeah,
As you say, with
absolutely.
like having chronic health conditions, like your chronic health can be like maybe a bit better than one day, and then you can have like certain periods of flare ups, and
Yeah.
where days where you're severely ill, and that like does impact on like being autistic as well. And I think that flexibility of what autism is, like people forget how broad the spectrum is.
Yes, totally. I think they think a spectrum is left to right and it's
Yeah,
fixed. You're either mild or you're severe. You're either quirky or you're tragic. And you, like you say, it fluctuates. And also it's interesting how people will use those good days against you. Well, you managed it last week. You did so well the other week. It's like, well, I was in a different situation the other week. Or like it's very, very hard to get people to understand the reality of your, ever evolving lived experience. And also when you think about how that works in terms of disability benefits, where
yes,
they effectively test your ability to do things in really like limited and regressive ways, and
yeah,
it's unrealistic. So if you can do something one day, or you can crawl across a room in some cases, I've heard horror stories, then they assume that you are able to be completely independent and able to work, and that you don't need support. And it's a regressive picture, and it results in people not getting the financial or practical support that they need to live.
yeah, because as you're saying with benefits and the welfare system, it focuses a lot on what can you do and trying to find ways of like proving something off you, rather than like what would, like to me it seemed like the best approach would be like finding what do you need help with, what like support resources you would need, whether that's financial and stuff like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, a benefit system where you didn't feel wonderful, wouldn't it? Just a
Yeah,
benefit system where you could actually state your needs and you didn't have to exaggerate. Not that anyone's exaggerating, but
yeah,
you don't feel like you have to present the worst possible case scenario at all times. You can say, look, sometimes I'm able to do this, most of the time I'm not, and sometimes I might have a good day and things are better, but like 90% of the time. And if you could present, be treated like an adult, be treated with with some credit, with the benefit of people trusting you to relay your own
yeah,
experience. I don't think most I'm sure there are very few outliers who just don't want to work. I don't think 99.9% of people are just trying to cheat some system because they can't be bothered. I think that's ludicrous. And I think treating 100% of people as if they're trying to scam you in case the 0.01% slip through. I would rather those people fraudulently claimed some benefits, these tiny nothing percentage of people,
yeah.
then the people who really need those benefits can't have an adult, frank conversation about what their needs are without feeling under attack, without being worried that they're going to lose their livelihood or their support.
Yeah, because I like with the benefit system, like as you're saying with like with the state of it, it's like like I have to keep on proving yourself and replaying for different things. And it's like with condition like autism and like your chronic illnesses, they aren't temporary conditions, like you always going to
Mm-hmm.
be living with the conditions and be being autistic. So it's like it's quite tiring to prove it. And it's like sometimes I think it'd be nice if you could have one like certificate of proof, as like the person was talking with Esther was like find see, rather than sometimes telling people she's autistic, it's things much easier just to say, her own specific needs
Yeah.
that she may have, and like the different like ways of like having support. And I think sometimes that can be much like preferable, just to be able to like actually say what your needs are.
Yeah.
And like I say, like it would be handy if you could just have a certificate, this is what I need help with. And as you say, it's then advice, like like the system's putting you too much adults just to like try to get like prove you like not when that like 1 or 0% or whatever.
Yeah, I really believe it should be like an honor system. You should not have to prove anything to anyone. You should be treated like a grown up with with honesty and agency. And also, it's a system that locks autistic people out, especially if you don't have someone advocating for you. If you
Yeah,
find admin difficult, if you have executive dysfunction issues, like I really do, if I had, I'm very, very fortunate to not, at this point in my life, be having to be reliant on benefits in any way. I'm fortunate to be able to work, and I'm fortunate that my husband works, and that if I couldn't work, we'd probably be okay. But if I had to, regularly fill out forms, regularly advocate for myself face to face, regularly know what the right things to say were, and and all of those things, that for me, someone who struggles greatly with executive function, that could be fatal.
yeah,
That could prevent me. Again, it's obstructive to the point of being discriminatory against the people it purports to help.
yeah. Because with like autistic people having so very different current conditions, as you say, with like chronic illnesses to like if you got like specific learning difficulties to learn disabilities, intellectual disabilities, then like form filling and like going through the benefits process in the system then can be incredibly tough and difficult.
Yeah, absolutely.
And from what we've been saying, it's like I find often like through conversations and like understanding about like our like disability community and autism and neurodivergent communities and the issues we find are problematic. It's like the lack of having a balanced power where neurodivergent and disabled people aren't in the power to like set like the language that they use around diagnoses or like the as you're saying about the benefits or educational support and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think there's a problem in general in autism discussions, and this has come up recently. That horrible Spectrum News article that came out. I don't know if you saw all of that. That Spectrum News posted an article, which I felt, I'm going to be very careful with the language I use here for legal reasons, I felt was quite an unfair character assassination of some very, very good people, who made some very reasonable points about a very problematic study, and they were sort of quite, I think, quite comprehensively ripped to shreds, and it was implied that they're impeding scientific progress and all of this. There is a problem with the way that the scientific community in general, and I am not, I am pro science, yay science, but when you are studying a group of people and a marginalized group of people, and you are then you are claiming to speak for that group of people, and you end up speaking over that group of people, treating them like lab rats, not listening to their lived experience, not listening to the studies or areas of study that might help improve their lives, and instead focusing on pathologizing them, focusing on things that feel dangerously close to eugenics. And those are the people monopolizing the conversations about autism. Those are the people generally interviewed about autism on TV. They're the people writing books about autism. They're the people consulting on autism projects. They're the people who are advising parents on their autistic children, and autistic adults are sort of treated like they're hysterical or difficult, or or trying to sort of whitewash the experience of being autistic and paint it or romanticize it. That's another word that comes, like you're trying to romanticize autism, when what you're trying to say is no, like just please don't blink us out of existence. We exist and we're valid and we like who we are, but you could do these things to make our lives easier, and maybe stop focusing so hard on trying to cure us. It is frustrating, and I don't blame like regular people for not having a clue what goes on, because of course you trust experts, and you should trust experts. And unfortunately, in this case, some of the experts are not particularly listening to the subjects they say they so desperately want to understand.
Yeah, as you were saying with that, it's like we should be able to trust experts, but it's like often not. You do feel like like why can't there be like experts that are seen within the communities that are neurodivergent or disabled people that are trusted for the authority of personal experience. And as we say, like it's important to be able to trust science and believe in the facts of science, but like as science is supposed to do is find the answers of what the disabled and neurodivergent community want answers to, and like finding ways of like support and understanding us in the ways we went to as like the science community would naturally research like autistic community if they try and understand more about autism, and for that should really be listening to that community.
Yeah, I think the problem is that, we talk about science like this catch-all term, and science, it's studied by humans, and humans set an agenda as to what they focus on. And so, we're not talking about sort of social sciences or psychology of trying to understand autistic people and our needs, or we're not talking about pharmacological science in terms of trying to help people with things like sensory processing disorders or executive function, or any kind of therapies that support us in our autistic identities, and validate us, but still help us to exist in the world without. I'm not talking about ABA, with that tries to sort of stamp out our autistic traits, or lessen the impact of autistic people on the people around them. And so, when it's really reductive for people to say, oh, you're impeding the progress of science because you don't want scientists to say, discover the gene, the autism gene. It's like, well, okay, take a step back. Why do you want to know what the gene is? If you're not trying to do anything with it, if you're not trying to eliminate it, what is the purpose of it? If you don't want prenatal screening, if you don't want to effectively, eugenics us, that's not a verb, but you know what I mean, out of existence, what do you need to know that for? And in the meantime, there are many autistic people who do exist, who we and I'm not going to get into this trap of saying, oh, we're valuable to the world. We are. And any diversity, all diversity is valuable to the world. All diversity is good for, it offers different perspectives, it offers different talents, different gifts. But even if you are never able to contribute anything sort of in an economic sense to the world, it's irrelevant. We're human beings, we're valid, and we have needs now. We need, I don't care what gene caused me. I care whether or not I can get through a Zoom call without my eyes watering. I don't care, what my spit says about why I'm autistic. I care about being able to call the doctor, or fill out a form, or be able to work if I want to, or all of the, it's not about impeding science. It's about trying to just steer the ship in a direction that's actually going to be actively helpful to us and not treat us like a problem to be solved.
Yeah, that's a fair point to say, because it's about, like, as you were saying with the issue of the looking at like whether they studied and stuff like the genes of the causations of autism, like it should be like a reason that the autistic community themselves would want to find out, and actually asking why that you want to find this out, and like examine the ethics of it. And I think that like it's difficult for the autistic community and the neurodivergent disabled communities, how the majority of the scientific community seems to be far apart from these communities that they're supposed to be doing research on and working for, really. And like any like autistic scientists in the field of autism research should be able to like have an authority where they can advise on and like have ability to direct the research, or like speaking to like focus groups or like very autistic people. It's be like finding out the things that they want to know, because as you were saying, that like an autistic person would want to know maybe the stuff that like the science effects of like maybe like support with like the mental health and the occurrence of like stuff like depression and anxiety and trauma, and or to, as you saying about the sensory conditions, like, you know, like how like if your sensitivity to bright lights, how that can cause headaches, and something that can produce light sensitive and different stuff like that. That's like the stuff that an autistic person would want support with, not like knowing so much about the like autism genes or different stuff like that.
Yeah, totally agree. And you know, how do I sleep through a night? I don't think I've ever slept through a whole night. That would be great if they could find a way to sort of deal with sleep disturbance in autistic people, because a lot of the solutions in general for a lot of things, they are based with, you know, understandably, because neurotypical people are the majority, they are based with neurotypical people in mind. And so a lot of the therapies, a lot of the medications, and we also, by the way, can have odd reactions to medications. Things work differently for us, you know, all of these things. I would love research into specifically into how to help autistic people with different conditions and in medicalized settings and all sorts of things, but we don't get a say in where that research is focused, and we're treated like we want to get in the way of that progress instead.
Yeah, because it's like sometimes in a day-to-day life, like you can think of like a like kind of saying specific question that you're thinking of, like, oh, I wonder like how like so many different like chronic illnesses tend to co-occur in autistic people, or as you were saying about or like varying different things, like with medication and stuff, like, you know, and the sleep issues, like how like does this all you know, link in? Because like as you say that, like the community's a bit more power advanced, and it's like I think like developing its understanding and like our learning of the autistic experience far more than like the holistic community does about us. And as I say, like the like new majority of more holistic, so then the researching and working in the science field, and then, you know, it's not examining these things, so we still yet to have answers and research into the issues of, like, as I say, sleep and all that.
Yeah, and also just expediting diagnoses of comorbid conditions could be really useful. If you have a comprehensive picture of, say, like you say, comorbid conditions, and different autistic profiles, and perhaps the statistical likelihood of different autistic people with different traits having different comorbid conditions, then you wouldn't have to, say, for years, go through an holistic medical community that isn't designed to know what your comorbid conditions might be, that you are, say, automatically, when you receive an autism diagnosis, referred on to test if you have chronic pain, or if you have any chronic conditions that are unexplained, you're then referred on for things that might explain them, that are commonly comorbid with autism. That would be amazing.
Yeah, because as you're saying about like that in the diagnosis process, like I was diagnosed at 10, and like, and it like for like much of the years, and like into like up until the age of 18, it was only like when I started to understand how autism affects me. And as you're saying, it's important to be able to like find a bit more understanding of how it affects you. And as I say, then like I have a question that's asked about, you know, how do you sleep, and then like what, like do you experience chronic pain, and see if like there's other conditions affect you. And like that screening would be so important, because as you say, with like chronic illnesses, it does take years to diagnose and find the answers out, and having more medical specialists wherever they get the ones that diagnosing us, or like general practitioners, GPs, who were more like trained in autistic people and supporting autistic people, so can get like some direct support from when we go to like see about like symptoms, and see like how they link with like our autism and like the general statistics of those of the community, so it can be easier to understand our health conditions.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, it is exhausting, isn't it? And
Yes.
it does sort of show, it makes me feel a bit like the people who are supposed to be responsible for the cutting edge developments in your care effectively as a disabled person. They view you with contempt as a community. They think that you're all hysterical and in the way of them, and that's such a problem. If you hate us so much, like, go away, don't
Yeah.
study it. Like, go and study. Like, was that someone, oh, who was it that posted on Twitter? I'm so sorry that I can't remember who posted this, but someone said, if that's it, study rocks or whatever, study something else. Don't study a marginalized community who have support needs and need people to take those seriously.
Yeah, and it's like when you think about rocks, it's like they've been studied for years, and it's like not like they do much to much happening with a rock at the minute that like needs help, urgent help with, or
No.
urgent support. So it's like like when you think about like when it comes to stuff like that, like what should scientifically focus on, or like careers or areas of investment, and where careers should go in science, like it should be definitely be more prioritized of what impacts life and what like is in danger, as you're saying, with like the research into autism is very important advice, as you can like improve like the quality of life and like the longevity in life, as understanding more about the mental health of autistic people and our health conditions can like extend our life, as like mental health and stuff like that can have huge impact on our life expectancy.
Totally. And I also think that there's a sort of a shame that the medicalization, the type of medicalization and pathologizing, I got that out, of autistic traits, and the way that we're discussed in the scientific community really impacts the sort of the relationship as well between parents of autistic children and autistic adults, because parents of autistic children are being told by experts, like, your child is basically broken and you need to send them to this therapy to make them normal, and look at the amazing results, they're not bothering you as much anymore. And what they're hearing from autistic adults is quite a lot of anger and frustration, and it's not clicking for them that their autistic child is going to grow up to be an autistic adult. And perhaps it would be prudent, if they love their child, to create a world where their child isn't demonized or disregarded or bullied out of their perspective, because they're no longer a child. And I absolutely want to say that this is not like anti-parents of autistic children. I think there's a huge difference between I think there's an autism parent with a capital A and a capital P who makes that their identity, and who will post their child's meltdowns online, and really the focus is on how hard it is to be around us. And I think that's a problem. That's a problem for me, and I'm never going to be okay with that. But there are so many wonderful parents of autistic children who I talk to on a regular basis, who reach out a lot, and they just want to know how to do the best by their kids, and the adult autistic community online is really helpful and useful to them. So I don't want to make it sound like we're all at odds and there's this war between parents of autistic kids and autistic adults. There isn't, but I think there is a certain narrative that is presented to parents that they then come up against the adult community, and they don't know what to make of it.
Yeah, I had a feeling that you wasn't talking about the majority of the autistic parents community when you were speaking about that. As like I had that you was saying about the information that all like sometimes medical professionals give them, and like some of the research and things you can find out about autism and researching online, and like sometimes a parent might be led down the wrong path by like some of the scary stuff you might read online, and the kind of like doom, like stuff online about autism, and I'd say that making a child sound invalid, or like like not speaking nice of the autistic child. And I'd say for like a child with higher support needs, then that can like impact of how they like see how their child's seen for their life, and like it can give them like a quite negative experience of how how they experience sport, and medical professionals telling like their child like not worthy, and then it can be quite hard for the parent to fight all that.
Yeah, absolutely. If you tell a parent your child is ill, your child is broken, your child needs these therapies in order to have a normal life, they will never have a normal life if they don't have these therapies. And you're not really gonna necessarily stop to interrogate that. You're going to believe the experts because the vast majority of cases you should believe experts. They know what they're talking about. But in this case, not I think it comes down to a fundamental lack of empathy, ironically, and a fundamental lack of human understanding that your autistic child might not want the quote unquote normal life that you think is so important, and all these milestones that you value, they're your values. They're not necessarily your child's values, they're society's values. Again, like, for example, stopping autistic children from playing the way that they want to play, and things that are totally harmless, like stop lining up your toys, play with them properly, stop stimming doesn't hurt anyone, sit still. You shouldn't have such narrow interests. You should want to go on holiday, you should want to break your routine. And these aren't, a lot of the time, I'm not speaking for everyone, obviously,
Yeah.
but a lot of the time these aren't the things that make us happy. The things that make us happy are hyper focusing on our interests. The things that make us happy are lining things up in a pleasing way as kids. The things that make us happy are other things that we're naturally doing. And to try and stamp them out of us it's not giving us the gift of a quote normal life. It's taking away the life that feels good to us in favor of a life that looks good to you.
Yeah, because it's like for happy life, it should be for what makes us feel good and what makes us safe, as you were hinting at there. And like I was saying with that, and I think from like historically then, like sometimes the labels have had huge impact, and how like people are, like perceived autistic children and like the support set. Like, and like yourself, I was diagnosed, like as you hinted earlier, at like the age of 10. And like from that, because I was given label mild Asperger's at the time, like as you know, it just use all autistic at the minute, these days. And like I think that had an impact and like lack of support, a lack of understanding, like my mother was given, because like I think she had like a set of documents and like didn't hear much afterwards. And like and like it's then it can be like any like support you would have to like try to reach out voluntarily like to different parent groups, and that can be quite daunting, and like probably not feel like the best way to get like support. And like I think like what would help things a lot better is if like parents and children were given examples of what of like autistic people by whether they coming into schools and speaking with parents.
Yes, totally.
As like I think like stuff like autism and other neurodivergent disabilities should be like taught in school, and like like and so like it's can be normalized, and like I find it would be a better way of like advocating for your needs and understanding your needs, and like being able to say what makes you happy, what makes you uncomfortable, and like if like you're finding things a bit too loud, and how to ask for support and stuff like that. And like it's like from like being able to have like a space where we could also like tell our stories in the media and create representation of autistic people telling their stories, neurodivergent people telling their stories. So it's not just like an news article of like a journalist researching into telling a story of an autistic person, but like an autistic person telling him itself, and it's like that shows how important like someone like you like writing your own life in a memoir.
Yeah, and it's getting better. It is getting better, but we still have, quite a prevalence and an alarming prevalence of autism shows or autism books or autistic coded characters being written by neurotypical writers. And it's really tricky because, like, obviously writing is about imagination, and you can't just write books that are just about your own identity and, you know, and nothing else, because they're boring and homogenous. However, if you are dealing with a minority experience that doesn't have a huge voice of its own yet, so, you know, if there aren't hundreds upon hundreds, it's getting a lot better, but there aren't yet hundreds upon hundreds of stories from autistic people, and there certainly aren't many diverse autistic stories. They tend to be, and, you know, I recognize I'm part of this problem. You know, I'm Jewish, but I'm still, you know, I'm a white passing Jewish woman. Like, I'm white skinned, I'm an Ashkenazi Jew, and so, like, it's a completely different experience, say, from being Black and autistic, or, you know, any other, like, I guess, like, identity and intersection that means that you're going to be interpreted in a different way, or your story hasn't been heard as much. And so until we have this breadth of stories from autistic people themselves, I really wish neurotypical writers would just step away from it, just until there's enough of a baseline cultural understanding. If you want to have at it after that, go for it. But when we are still at a stage where autistic people are just trying to make themselves understood on such a fundamental level, and it's the type of autistic stories that are being told are still so narrow, it's very frustrating to see sort of TV shows being commissioned with, like, created by holistic people that are about, quote, autism. And it's, but, you know, there's also, conversely, been a recent sort of raft of autistic led shows being picked up. Elle McNichol has her show coming out on BBC. Holly Smales has just been announced Geek Girl for Netflix, and that's all really great and exciting. We need a lot more of that, I think.
Yeah, as you say, needs a lot more from that, from you know, like, as you say, marginalised basal communities on, like, different sexualities, etc. And, like, as you say, that from when you were diagnosed and, like, first, like, had the word autism put to you, then, you know, like, you was thinking of the like, Matthew type green man, like, stereotype.
Yeah.
And I think, like, from, like, you know, like, yourself, like, writing a memoir to, like, as you're saying, like, authors like Elmer Nicol and Holly Smale writing their stories out and speaking about the autism in the media, it does help go a long way, because, like, for years and decades there has been a misrepresentation of autistic women, a lack of representation. And so I think now it's like a start in the progress of, like, seeing more representation of autistic women.
Yeah.
And so I think it's, like, great that you've been able to tell your story in a book, and, right, from your own experiences, as there's not many places that like a young autistic woman would be able to find much about somebody who's gone through like mental health struggles, you know, given all the labels, late diagnoses, to like struggles in relationships and different stuff like that. And that areas hasn't been explored. And you, like, as you were saying, it felt like, I think, like, you speaking as like a Jewish woman, I think that's, oh, Jewish autistic woman, I think that's still important, because there still hasn't been many, like, Jewish women, autistic women represented in the media, and it's important to tell as many different stories from, like, the decades-old stereotypes and broaden that out.
Yeah, totally. And you know, within Jewish culture specifically, there are certain stereotypes and ways that, like, Jewish women are read that can feed into our lack of diagnosis. You know, there's a sort of the stereotype of the you know, very big, emotional, hysterical Jewish woman, and that can mean that our traits are missed because we're being perceived in ways that are misogynistic. And there's actually weirdly quite a high prevalence. I don't know the statistics. I'm speaking perhaps anecdotally, but I think, you know, that autism in the Jewish community is quite high. And like a lot of the other sort of women who've been writing memoirs and stuff are actually, especially in the UK, I know are Jewish, like Joanne Lindbergh, Laura James. So it's really interesting that sort of maybe culturally there was something in our upbringing that meant that we weren't recognized, or maybe that's, you know, maybe that's me over analyzing, but I think every minority community will have something like that to different degrees, and in some cases it might be very dangerous. Say, you know, if you're a young autistic Black man in America and you're not diagnosed and you have a meltdown, that can be a really dangerous situation if you're interpreted through a racist lens or by a racist police officer, or, you know, a racist teacher, or you're restrained, and, you know, that can be very, very a very different consequence to me, you know, who is, you know, for all intents and purposes, I say for all intents and purposes because whiteness and Judaism is really complicated because you know, Nazis, but I like to the wider world, for all intents and purposes, unless I announce that I'm Jewish, I'm white, the consequences of me having a meltdown in public are just embarrassing, versus for someone else can be really dangerous. And all of these experiences need to be part of this big mosaic. It can't just be, you know, white folks telling their stories all the time. We have to make room for more voices, amplify more voices, and make sure that, you know, the publishing world, the you know, the commissioning world is telling these stories as well, you know, not just the ones that they feel comfortable with.
Yeah, I was just saying, it's been good that you've been able to establish and, you know, find a community of like Jewish men who are autistic telling their stories. But as we're saying, it's important that like Black men in America, like Black men around the world, could have, like, you know, like start to be able to give them platforms to tell their stories, and like be able to like safely have a platform where they can start advocating for themselves, so we can have this conversation around like the ableism, the racism, and in like within a Black community, know how to support, you know, like a Black autistic community, and it's important, as you're saying, to tell varying stories, and, you know, like make very community stronger and more represented.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, the awareness that a lot of us might have, you know, like we might be on the LGBTQIA under that rainbow somewhere, like quite likely. We tend to not be sort of cis, straight, het, all of us, like all of those hetero, like all these things. And so, you know, understanding that can be a really crucial part of our identities too. And so intersectionality in who gets to tell their stories is so important. We've got such a long way to go with that. I think, you know, it's the progress is so painfully slow.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it feels like, because, you know, as you say, that like right now, in terms of like who has the ability to get like a memoir published, or have the like story told in like a TV show, to any type of film or documentary, whatever, it's still, as you say, in like a marginalized few, and, you know, from like it's still quite like from white passing people who are, you know, like still from privileged backgrounds, or like or like in positions where it's a bit more easy and to write a book, or, you know, get something published into story, and it's hard to still got many hurdles to come in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And those hurdles start, you know, right at the beginning. They start with really complex things like socioeconomic disparity. They start with encouragement and education and opportunity, and, you know, these small acts of discrimination that will shape your whole life. So, you know, it takes for a disabled person, it takes a huge amount of support and financial security and everything else to be able to sort of make it in an industry like the arts. And that's true of, you know, whether you're disabled or not. It's a very privileged industry. But if you are disabled, it's harder to say hold down a job and support yourself and and also have the time and energy to write at the end of the day, or to have that self-belief, or anything else. So it's the problems are structural and societal, and there are problems in publishing, and there are problems in commissioning, and there are problems in lots of things. But all we can do is sort of keep, I guess, keep passing the mic and making noise, and hoping that that things, we can all do better with that. I think I tend to like, I'm probably quite a self-absorbed person, and I tend to just like relay my own experience and forget to amplify other people. And I think it's really important to remember.
Yeah, it is important to remember. And like, as you say, like, as you introduce yourself as somebody who's written for comedy shows in Britain, or like typical shows. So was like to already been established as a writer in the field of comedy writing, did that help you like to have the confidence to go on to book writing and be writing your debut in memoir?
Yeah, and I think there's a sort of ironic tragedy that had I not already had some sort of profile and some sort of success in the field, and I wasn't wildly successful. I was still starting out to a great extent, but I think had I not already established myself to some degree, I don't know how seriously I would have been necessarily taken if I just come along and said, "Oh, I'm autistic and I want to be a writer." I don't know how the industry would have received me if I hadn't already been like in the industry and people hadn't known me a little bit. And it wasn't something that was an add-on. And I think that's another thing to be really aware and mindful of, that people shouldn't have to mask their autistic traits or be late diagnosed or anything else in order to have those opportunities and to be taken seriously in the industry. And I did notice as well after my diagnosis that there were the opportunities changed. People stopped, actually pretty much almost overnight, stopped asking me into writers' rooms. It's almost like there was some sort of stigma attached to being autistic, where they thought I might suddenly, even though I'd never been a problem in the past, suddenly be very volatile in the room or not be able to cope or something. But I got a lot of bigger opportunities. I got, long-term projects, narrative projects, book projects. And so like, it which actually works really nicely for me, because I much prefer working in my own time and at home. But it is interesting that things did change, things did shift with the way, and I think people are sort of a bit jumpy around me until they get to know me a bit. They're like, "Oh, you're not going to bite my head off suddenly or start crying," or I probably will start crying. I cry a lot, but but it's fine, it's happy crying. But yeah, it's interesting. I had one person who I worked with for a long time who who always thought I was quite competent, I think, and then I in passing disclosed my diagnosis and they started calling me like little buddy. It's like, that's yeah, I mean, okay, I guess I'm little buddy now.
Yeah, as you were saying, after like you had bigger opportunities, which was something of a positive. But like, as you said, you like kind of like weren't as included in writers' rooms then when you had a diagnosis. And like, even though like you, as I said, you've been able to work a bit more flexible with doing these bigger projects and opportunities that you're grateful for. But I guess you would like the opportunity to have always been quite included after your diagnosis in the writers' room, and still quite encouraged to go in and write for television shows.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is like the pandemic and sort of a natural like and I'm at higher risk of complications of COVID, so I tend to stay out of things. But this predates the pandemic by a couple of years, and I did notice those sort of face-to-face group opportunities drying up, because maybe people have had autism training that says we don't like groups, or they're worried, they're worried because of things they've heard. I don't know what the reason was, or if it was just a coincidence and I'm reading too much into it, but it did feel like that side of things dried up, and the sort of the longer term, like bigger picture projects started happening. And for the longest time it just looked like I wasn't working, because I was working quietly on a book that hadn't been announced. And so that was a really weird time for me, because I was sort of like, I'd put so much of my identity into like, I write in writers' rooms, it's really cool, and then like it just wasn't happening anymore. But ultimately, I'm happy with the way things have gone, and I wouldn't change it. I'm happy with where I am.
glad you're happy with it, where you are, where you are. I guess the thing is, like, when you felt that, you know, you get less opportunities, you would think quite introspective then. But so I guess there's still like lack of like things that should be like changed a bit and adjusted in the workplace of writers' rooms to make autistic people and the neurodivergent people feel included in the spaces.
Yeah, I think there's a long way to go with that. You know, I when I first started sort of wearing my sunglasses into writers' rooms, because it hurts not to. You know, I would get sort of comments, and there was this one really unpleasant experience with this. I was doing a room just for this show, doing links for something, and this guy just sort of, who I'd never met before, just came in and just started interrogating me about why I was wearing my sunglasses, and I'd never spoken to before. And the guy I was writing with, just like, I guess to get rid of him, was like, she has a condition. He just stood there and, oh, a condition. How interesting. And he just stood there glaring at me. And I was thinking, this is nothing. Just go. This is nothing to do. What's it to you? What's on my face?
Yeah.
I'm doing my work. Leave me alone. And so, you know, it makes you a bit more apprehensive about going into these spaces when people don't have that education to understand why you might have different needs to them.
Yeah, because like if a person says that, you feel quite intimidated, and
yeah,
you know, like it's a bit things that you wouldn't know how to deal with, and like you shouldn't have to deal with that in the workplace, because I say that, you know, like you're probably working in a room like that, probably quite bright fluorescent lights,
yeah,
and if you got the sun coming in, it's quite bright then, and you would need like something like sunglasses then, and just to like dim the room out, and yeah, then it's quite hard to explain things, and as I said, you didn't have to then. And what was like working in a writing room on like comedy shows, like especially focused on the news as an autistic person, and like, you know, like focusing on like trying to write jokes on like the news of the week.
It's a lot of fun. You know, it's sort of, it can be a high pressure, and if you're like me and you find it difficult, I think what was always tricky for me was when people were chucking jokes out into the room, and when it was sort of, I guess a group situation like that, and everyone's making noise, and you're like, no, I need quiet to think of the jokes. Like, I can't do it like this. And there, you know, there were some shows where that was part of the process. You would have, you know, half hour where everyone just chucked things out, and whatever makes it on. And I always would sit there close to tears during that point, because I was like, I can't think because you're all talking, and all I can think is the last thing you said. But you know, it's also, you know, an issue of comfort. Like, I have a writing partner for screenwriting stuff, and he's brilliant and wonderful, and you know, we tend to build on stuff that each other says, and I actually find it a lot easier to work when I'm talking through things with him. But when there's everyone talking at once, it's quite a lot. But most of the time, you know, writers' rooms can be really fun if you manage, you know, if you do have people who understand what your needs are, that you just need to go away for half an hour and work on things by yourself, and you can't be in that sort of hectic environment. If you can convey those needs and people can be understanding, then it's great. So I think, you know, just, yeah, more understanding is needed, and more inclusivity, and not just tokenistic inclusivity, where they're like, oh, we're recruiting neurodivergent people, but they don't really understand what that means, or how to properly support neurodivergent people once they're actually in the space, you know.
Yeah, because as you were saying, after like, then if you know, like you kind of got that conversation by bouncing around, then you know, like it's hard to think, because you're trying to process the noise of what everyone's saying around you, and then it kind of gets quite crammed and busy in your head with the sensory processing stuff, and like probably find it easier just to be able to like listen to like a short bit of that, and then like reflect for like independently with going on quiet, and then like feedback the ideas. And I guess that's probably why you find it's been more preferable to like whether it's writing books or whether like writing articles or stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely, for me personally. But you know, everyone's different, and that doesn't mean I'd never want to do a room again. It just I think I'd want to do a room understanding myself better and being able to better convey what I need from that situation.
yeah, as like hinted, it's like your career's evolved from that point, and you're kind of like want to try things a bit different.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
So like after you've published your book, and you like that's been out for a couple of months, and it came out in October. I think was it last October?
Oh God, I think it was the
No.
May before last. I can't even remember now. I think it was. Was it May? It wasn't last year. It was the year before. The pandemic has completely warped my sense of time and space. I didn't even know when my book came out. I don't know. That's embarrassing.
Yes, and so like, have you found yourself working on any other projects?
I have, and it's one of those really, really annoying things where it's like, there's a lot going on and none of it's been announced yet. So it's just another couple of years where it looks like I'm not working.
Yeah, you can't really tease anything. So in like way to promote your book, and like the stuff you work on, and like what you've done there, like give people like a tease, or like a reason why you like to purchase the book, or what they can expect from reading your book.
Gosh, well, it's one autistic person's experience. So like if you're looking for a textbook on autism, it's not for you. But it's, it's a comedy memoir, and it has its sad bits and it has its moments, but ultimately, it's written, there's a lot of gags. Most people seem to appreciate them. Some people don't. It's okay. But it's a book with a sense of humor. It doesn't take itself too seriously. I think it's quite a light, quick read. So I think I think the misunderstanding is that it's for autistic people and that's it. And like everyone knows an autistic person. Everybody, at least one. Like you probably know a lot of autistic people. You might not know that you know autistic people, but you do. And you might read the book and recognize yourself or someone else that you know and love in it, or just understand how to better support people around you, or what's going on for them, how to not put them through the kind of things that autistic people have been put through historically. So I'd say it's read that, and read lots of other books by autistic people as well. There are lots of great books by autistic people. Like don't let that be the only thing that you read and think, well, I know about autism now because I'm one person.
Yeah, as you were saying, it's quite good. It's like not like a textbook, for too much of a factual or like telling of autism, because like that's already been done, and like it's like sometimes if you're trying to find like a nice book to read on autism, like an easy one to read, like you don't want to be faced with something a bit too jargony and hard to follow. So it's quite good just to have like something that's kind of like authentic, like stories of an autistic person to follow. And as you say, like it's a good starting point of like an autistic person's account, and like from that you could read of many autistic people's books that are coming out.
And, absolutely.
And like I think it's quite helpful then to add elements of comedy in, because like then, as you say, it does make it easier to read and a bit more easier to follow and a bit more entertaining to read, because like I think that it can be quite emotive book, because like as you say, you like have elements of comedy, because especially around like some of the labels and like finding light in some of the moments of your life, and then like you also deal with elements of personal trauma and like like loss of family members, caring for family members, to have different elements of like empathizing on as an autistic person. And I think it's quite good that the book brings out elements of like what somebody could read in an article about autism, or what like traits people might see, and bring that to life and humanize it, and like see how it can be seen in an autistic person they may know, and like to be able to like go, oh, that's maybe like that makes a bit more sense of the person I know, or makes a bit more sense of the autistic person I am, and it makes it be easier to empathize if you're just reading like a natural story of like somebody's life and somebody's traits of autism, rather than like just list all like what's best to like be around an autistic person.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Well, that was the aim. So, I'm really glad that that's coming across in some way. So
Yeah,
that's really good to hear.
yeah. I'd say it was quite an easy read, but like I'd say there's like been like certain points where like deals with like family loss or like
Yeah.
family stuff like that. There may have been like moments where reading might want to pause, but I'd say it's quite good read, like and like quite good reflective and like it all comes together, very good.
Thank you. Yeah, no, definitely some trigger warnings there. Like,
Yeah,
if you've lost loved ones to cancer, or there's some difficult stuff in there. And
yeah,
so like all the content warnings, like read with
yeah,
caution, take breaks if you need to. You don't have to read it if it sounds
yeah,
too much. So like yeah, just like it's a real life story, and some crappy things
yeah.
happen in life, and that's what it is.
I guess when you were writing it, you'll probably need to have like breaks from it yourself. And
Yeah.
how did it feel like writing down very personal things that, like anybody could pick up on yourself and read?
Yeah, it is, it's not an easy process. I had really great editors and publishers, and they were very supportive and like really let me lead on what I felt comfortable sharing. And it's interesting that like the more I share, the less anxious I feel about it in a way, because it's like, what are people going to use as a gotcha? I've said everything myself, like it's out there. It's, like
Yeah,
there's something sort of empowering about owning your stuff, and not, not being ashamed or scared of what people might find out about you, because it's, you're up front, and there is something liberating about that. It's not for everyone, and I wouldn't recommend it for
yeah,
everyone, but for me it was, it was okay. I was all right. I know a lot of
yeah.
people have felt differently. A lot of different writers have found it very difficult, but I've been okay.
Oh, good. As as you said, like it's good you managed to put that out, and like I guess like from that, like your next project evolved from doing stuff like this, and so like other like elements of like what we're going to talk about, like I guess probably won't be much longer in the interview because I think we covered a lot of bases. As like like you engage a lot with social media and find that as a way of engaging the artistic community, learn about yourself and like the injustices in the community and different issues within it. And I guess it has helped you feel less alone. And like, I think the difficult thing about being autistic is like change as well, and change within like social media. And like, I think with like certain like way like Twitter and social media is gone, and like you very frequent use of social media, and you kind of like had certain negative experiences from it, and like certain negative comments made. So what by other people, towards you. So what's been your experience of using social media, and how are you finding like certain changes being made to social media?
Well, the great Musk takeover hasn't been wonderful. Like, social media has always been a difficult space for anyone with any kind of marginalized identity. I've been Jewish on the internet for a
Yeah,
lot longer than I've been autistic on the internet. And I've been both for 5 years, and quite publicly. And that I mean, it's a mixed bag. I've made some really, really great friends via Twitter, via social media. And I wouldn't have those relationships in my life. I've had amazing opportunities come from social media, but you get a lot of abuse. You get, it can be very difficult if you take that stuff to heart. I used to take it to heart pretty badly. It used to be very hurtful to me. I still have moments if I'm sort of in a bad mood, or if I'm emotional about something else, where I'll just sort of go off if somebody says the wrong thing. But most of the time I feel, at this point, I feel pretty resilient. It's like, what else are you gonna say? Come on, like I've been doing this for long enough. It's just, I just say, like, if you're using Twitter as a space to organize or whatever, block liberally. Be careful what you DM people, because I think it will all is all going to tumble out at some point. Twitter's very broken. And just lock down when you have to, take breaks when you have to, and just use it use it wisely, use it carefully, and put your mental health first at all times, because not everyone has a hard shell, and it can be really damaging.
Yeah, I can see you've been able to learn over the years and adapt as your like social media presence and like your follower account has grown on, how to like, you know, like take self-care and do things for your mental health, not let, you know, things, you know, like affect your mood too much. And, you know, like I think that's important to be you like, you know, found ways locking down or like taking breaks from Twitter. And I think that can be helpful because, you know, like social media, yes, can be a positive thing, but like can be quite negative as well. So there's nuances to it, as you say, like you manage to find friends and like learn so much from it. But as I say, like from like being like a Jewish autistic woman, you like seeing much ableism, anti-Semitism and misogyny on the platform. So guess, you know, like you've really seen the two sides of the platform.
Yeah, you get to see it all. You know, it's all sides of humanity, isn't it? It's the good, the bad, and the ugly. But you know, it's amplified, and we're not necessarily meant to deal with that kind of that level of constant input. So yeah, just self-care is what I'd say. If you're on it, like it great, but just, you know, look after yourself.
Yeah. Often not, like ends a conclusion point of the interview, and often not in the interview. I tend to like, this is one of the final questions. Maybe like whenever tricky one, but like whatever comes to your head at first. Like what one thing as an neurodivergent autistic person would you change in the world to make it better for yourself or other autistic people?
Oh, one thing. Oh man, that's,
it can be any random thing that comes to your head.
I would have this is a dream world. I would have specific, like highly trained carer for every autistic person, like a support person who like does all your stuff, because I have that in my husband. It's wonderful, can't recommend it enough. I would have that for everybody gets a John. Everybody gets a John to call the doctor for them and make their food for them and do the shopping and do the things that are scary and stressful, so that you can do the things that you're good at, and not have to suffer the things that you're not. I would clone him, and I would distribute him. The ethics of that, I'm not going to think about that, but I would mass manufacture my husband and give everyone one.
Oh, that's a nice compliment for your husband,
isn't it?
It's like, and so you can see like the answers that different people are giving for this question, and you know, like it's a bit fun to put out there, and you know, like to see what comes out. As like when comedian Harriet Kemsley on, you make the
she's great.
And she like came up with the idea of teleportation.
Oh, that's good. Teleportation and cloning. We're really high tech here.
What is there anything else? So you wanted to come on this pod, when you got invited to come on the podcast, is there anything in this conversation you wanted to say but you haven't got the chance to say yet?
Oh gosh, nothing I can think of. I've talked and talked. I just thank you so much for having me. It's been absolutely lovely, and real pleasure to just talk about being autistic for a while, and have that safe space. So thank you so much for creating it.
Yeah. Any quick things you want to promote or like tell people where to follow you?
Yeah, if you want to find me on Twitter, I'm at Sara, Sara _Rose_G. And you can get my book pretty much anywhere you buy books. It's called Drama Queen, One Autistic Woman and a Life of Unhelpful Labels. And there will be some very, very big announcements coming soon. Hopefully in April, there's going to be a big one coming. So keep your eyes peeled for that. And thank you so much again for having me. It's been brilliant.
Thanks very much for coming on. I'll you know, of course, I follow you on Twitter, so you see that announcement coming up this spring, and I hope to see that. Seems quite exciting for wherever you coming up in the pipeline. And thanks again for coming on. It's been a great interview. Thanks again.
Thanks. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye. Lovely talking to you. Bye.
Yeah.